Dear guests, dear participants, I am very glad to invite you at the Ukraine Crisis Media Center at our event, which is an final accord of the project, the topic of Ukraine's European integration on the eve of the elections of the EU countries, the information aspect. As you know, the year of 2025 may become a landmark in relations between Ukraine and the European Union, as it is expected that Ukraine will soon open the first cluster fundamentals in its negotiations with the Brussels, and also the ambitious goal of Kiev is to open another 5 clusters during this year. So at the same time, Russia is actively exploits skepticism about EU enlargement to interfere into the internal politics and discredit Ukraine, as well as the idea of Ukraine's accession to the EU. And the Russian narratives are also facilitated by the agenda of local far-right groups and populist forces in European countries. In this regard, against the backdrop of elections, become one of the most vulnerable times and periods regarding spreading of pro-Russian sentiments and disinformation, as elections is a time when disinformation campaigns are intensified through the rapid spread of information, news, when it is very complicated task to depict and to debunk all the scale of disinformation during electoral campaigns. And given that soon, during upcoming months, there will be elections in very important countries for Ukraine in terms of providing help and support for Ukrainian integration, and regarding war in Ukraine, I mean Romania, Poland, and the Czech Republic. These elections in these 3 countries are very important for Ukraine in terms of keeping support for Ukraine. So we decided to have a look at how Ukrainian integration topic is viewed in the media landscape of these countries in the context of the forthcoming elections. We provided a survey which conducted from March 10 to March 20, 2025, and more than 100 experts from Czech Republic, Poland, and Romania took part, which I'm very thankful and grateful for their participation. Soon we will present the results of this survey. But now I'd like to launch the discussion, and our prominent experts, prominent participants of this discussion today are Łukasz Adamski, Deputy Director of Merowecki Institute from Poland, Paweł Havlicek, Research Fellow at the Association for International Affairs from Czech Republic, Taras Żółtenko, PhD in National Security, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine Public Advisory Board, Igor Brailan, Candidate of Historical Sciences, Associate Professor at the Department of International Relations and Strategic Studies, National University Kyiv Aviation Institute. He will join us soon. Also, Mihai Vacariu, Assistant Professor at the Faculty of Journalism and Communication Sciences, University of Bucharest, will join us from Romania. And Mihai Isak, Foreign Policy and Security Analyst, Senior Editor, Caradenis Press Agency from Romania, also on board, and he also will address us soon. And finally, Yuri Olinik, PhD in Political Science, Head of Research Programs and the Ukrainian Strategic Studies Center. And me, Volodymyr Sylvian, PhD in Philosophy, Head of the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group at the Ukraine Crisis Media Center. I will moderate this discussion, and I'm very thankful for all the participants for their input. So Finally, before the launching of the discussion, I'd like to express gratitude for Renaissance Foundation and say that this event was organized with the support of the European Union and the International Renaissance Foundation within the framework of European Renaissance of Ukraine project, and its contact is exclusive responsibility of the authors and does not necessarily reflect the views of European Union and their International Renaissance Foundation. So our first panelist for today is Pavel Havlicek, and I'd like to ask him about the topics of about whether Ukraine and Ukrainian integration will become the relevant topic of the forthcoming elections in the Czech Republic, and if so, what aspects do you expect to be more relevant in terms of the elections? I mean, whether it will be just support for Ukraine in a war against Russia, or it may become the topics which are more relevant to the Czech Republic, such as refugees or economic aspects of European integration. Thanks.
Duży děkuji, Volodymyr. Thank you so much for having me, and greetings from Czechia. Sorry about the environment in which I'm actually, so difficult timing for me, but I'm really glad to be able to join you and speak about this important topic, because this is actually for many, including ourselves in the Association for International Affairs, this is the topic number one, really, how to sustain the support for Ukraine and how to withstand some of the challenges that come from the populistic nature of basically some of the political parties and their campaigns that we are already seeing in a very concrete shape and form. One of the starting positions when it comes to support for Ukraine is actually that Ukraine became quite a polarizing topic for the Czech society, I have to say. Possibly unlike in the case of Poland, for example, we do have a very complicated situation in which especially the fringes parts of the political spectrum and the far right and far left, they are very much abusing the anti-Ukraine sentiments that are not very much prevailing in the society, but they are definitely present in the society, and they are definitely positioning to capture these votes and these parts of the electorate. When it comes to the government's activities, these are, as you Volodymyr rightly described, quite notable, and there are a number of concrete examples, including the ammunition initiative, by which Czechia significantly punched above its weight, when being the number 2 provider, for example, of artillery shells and ammunition for Ukraine after the United States, still until today around the globe. So this is really something very notable and something that many people, including ourselves in the civil society, would like to preserve. Of course, there are many question marks about what comes next, and there is a highly likely scenario that there will be much more this opposition and also revisionist course present in the Czech foreign and security policy after the Czech upcoming parliamentary elections that will most likely take place at the end of September or beginning of October this year. So these are a bit different elections that, for example, in the case of Poland, these are parliamentary elections, and in the Czech constitutional setup, it is the government that leads on the foreign and security policy portfolio. So very significant, and that's why many question marks are still remaining. You mentioned some of these specific categories, for example, in terms of supporting refugees, or also when having a look at the military and security support to Ukraine, in which Czechia has done quite a lot over the past years, and these are exactly topics that are quite difficult to grasp, including for the opposition parties of ANO and the former Prime Minister Andrej Babiš, because he is trying to position his party and movement called ANO, yes, in English, as a catch-all party. So in sense, he doesn't want to touch Ukraine so much, frankly speaking, because he both tries to position for the anti-systemic part of the electorate being very critical towards Ukraine, but then also having the say and possibly the support also finally in the September-October elections for the disillusioned part and the electorate supporting the ruling parties. So here we see that Ukraine remains to be one of the rather difficult topics, actually, and we have to bear in mind that these topics that you mentioned, support of refugees, military and security type of cooperation, or also other kinds of support to enlargement, as you mentioned, these will be highly debated and discussed in the coming months that we are about to face the hot phase of the campaign that are still quite a few months ahead of us. So we will see what will really happen, but we already see that there is one underlining tone to this all, and this is quite a skeptical nature of the Czech society that I remember we discussed already in the past with you and the team of yours at the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, in which places the Czech society among quite fierce critics of the future enlargement of the European Union as such. No matter if it concerns Ukraine or Western Balkan countries, the Czech society became part of the old Europe, so to say, when it comes to having only one part, one cake, which if we divide, then there will be less for us. So very strongly articulated socio-economic perspective to this. So these are the question marks that I can see ahead. These also affect partially the support to refugees, but here at least that I can see, and the sociological polls prove that there is a bigger part of the Czech society, around 2/3, that already learned how to better work with Ukraine refugees and how to integrate them, how to accept the fact that these newcomers are joined, they are quite well integrated in the Czech society, so their support for refugees, it remains rather stable. But in general, the topic of migration, and with that connected also support to refugees, this is definitely that the far right and far extremes of the Czech political extreme, supported by a rather limited segment of the Czech society, definitely will play as a card. So this will be to watch. And but in general, maybe just to summarize, I'm quite hopeful that we will preserve the bigger part of the support to Ukraine, even for difficult, maybe potential difficult movements such as of Andrej Babiš and his ANO movement. We can see that they are, when pushed into the corner, especially on the foreign security policy portfolio, they don't dare to do any radical and very U-turn-like moves. So that this might give some hope that there will be quite a high level of sustainability when it comes to support to Ukraine after the upcoming parliament elections. But we still need to do the homework. We in the civil society still need to work both with the electorate but also with the political parties to preserve the sustainability of the Czech foreign security policy support to Ukraine, and this will remain one of the important topics for the upcoming months of the parliamentary campaigns. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Pavel, for your great and detailed input into our discussion. And of course, the Czech support is very crucial for Ukraine in terms of munition initiative and many others. So we really hope that forthcoming elections will not change this shift, and this cooperation will be further developed in recent years. And now I'd like to give the floors to Łukasz Adamski, Deputy Director of the Miroszewski Institute from Poland. And my question is about the threat of disinformation in regard the May elections in Poland, and what may be the main narratives regarding Ukraine which will be voiced by main presidential candidates.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation me to this event. I assume that you meant Russian disinformation, because sometimes disinformation might be, when it comes to Polish-Ukrainian relations, it might be related to Polish and Ukrainian media, unfortunately also. But when we are speaking about Russian disinformation, so then first of all, we have to ask the question, what is the Russian goal with respect to Poland? And this goal is not to make Poland a pro-Russian country, but rather because it is impossible because of historical memory, because of the social moods in Poland which are anti-Russian, because of the threat perception shared by the Polish government, by the Polish experts and intellectual elite, and by overwhelming majority of the population. So the aim of this disinformation campaign conducted by the Russian Federation or on behalf of the Russian Federation is firstly to make Polish state weak, and secondly to sow distrust both to Ukraine and to political opponents in Poland. So another way, it is about deepen the polarization along various ideological, political, and social lines in Poland, and destabilize and diminish trust into the Polish state, to the Polish institution. And then, what main topics are used by the Russian disinformation? Of course, those topics are predominantly related to Ukraine or to the war. So, firstly, they exploit the risk for Poland if Poland joins the war, or if Poland continues its support, military, economic, and political support for Ukraine. For example, it's about convincing Polish people that Russia has no interest in attacking Poland, so Poland should not provoke additionally Russia to make Russia angry, and to make Russia perhaps be inclined to certain anti-Polish movements. Then this information is also about Ukraine. So it's about, let's say, alleged war crimes committed by Ukrainian soldiers, or it is about alleged Ukrainian lack of thankfulness, gratuity to Poland for the support which Poland gave, especially in the first month of the war. Then, of course, it is about Ukrainian refugees. And I want to be understood correctly. Actually, all those topics are to some extent genuine problems, because there are social fears about consequences of Polish support for Ukraine. There are certain resentments towards Ukrainian population, Ukrainian migrant living in Poland. No, it's because of, let's say, certain differences in the culture, because of certain behavior which are not welcome in Poland, as for example smoking in public spaces. But what the Russian disinformation is doing, they exaggerate the scale, the scope of and the scale of such incidents. And of course, it's also about certain problems with historical roots, which of course exist in Polish-Ukrainian relations, and they even now, after certain, let's say, rapprochement in terms of, for example, exhumation of the victims of so-called anti-Polish action of Ukrainian insurgent army in 1943, 1945. So, like, the de facto ban on exhumation really provoked huge resentment, or at least it provoked mistrust to the Ukrainian state and to Ukrainian as a community as a whole. But what the Russian disinformation is doing, they are trying to exaggerate exactly the number of such problems and scale of such problems. And to some extent, they also appeal to anti-Western opinions, to anti-Western views. So, to some extent, one can say that they undermine credibility of NATO and the EU. But on the other hand, it is rather Mr. Trump's, for example, which is doing much more to convince Poland that it cannot rely unconditionally on US as an ally. Yeah? So therefore, I emphasize so much that they do not invent new topics, but rather they exploit existing topics. And when it comes to Polish presidential campaign, which is taking place right now, we have the first round of the election in mid-May 2025. So definitely there are certain topics related to Ukrainians. For example, the social benefits which Ukrainian migrants receive. And then the question of whether Poland should send their troops to Ukraine, provided there is a ceasefire in Ukraine and Poland would receive such requests from the Ukrainian government or not. And here I can tell you that absolute majority of Poles are against sending Polish troops. Firstly, because of this fear, fueled additionally by the Russian of being involved into the war, and secondly because Poland is objective reason, is a frontline country bordering to Ukraine, to Belarus, to Russia, and if let's say if the Ukrainian-Russian war evolves into a full-scale war between NATO and Russia, which is not excluded, then Poland would be probably the first country to be attacked. And third, the question of Volhynian massacre and let's say the unsolved problems of exhumation of its victims plus Ukrainian politics of memory and heroization of people who are perceived by many Poles, if not the majority, as terrorists or war criminals. It is something which is also being discussed in the presidential campaign. So to finalize, I can tell you that Ukraine became a major factor of internal politics in Poland, and it is in the interest of Ukrainian elites to understand this dimension, because if you understand this dimension, then you can help such people as me who are trying to do the best to improve Polish-Ukrainian relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Adamski, very much for your assessments. So we will keep forwarding the elections in Poland, which is very vulnerable for Ukraine, and also will further, Ukraine Crisis Media Center and the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group will follow developments in Poland, and we will also conduct further events and studies regarding the spread of disinformation in regard to Poland elections, and hopefully that the results, and I think we have a common ground on that we will further develop our relations, and Poland will stay the active advocate for Ukrainian European membership, as Poland was all the long years before. So thank you very much. I know that yours run out of time, but soon I think we will also maybe address some further questions regarding Polish elections. But now I'd like to move forward to the third country, to Romania. And we have two distinguished Romanian experts, Mihai Vacariu and Mihai Isac. To start with, I'd like to ask Mr. Vacariu, Assistant Professor at the Faculty of Journalism and Communication Sciences, University of Bucharest, about the main anti-Ukrainian narratives from his perspective, and particularly in the Georgescu campaign. As we know, Georgescu was excluded from elections, but still there are several candidates and as for now, we know that only one of them remained in the election campaign. I mean, the candidate who represents the far-right political parties in Romania. So, what is your perception regarding the main anti-Ukrainian narratives that may be voiced within election campaign in Romania, and what methods they may use in their campaign? Thank you.
Hello, nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting me to this presentation. And I will share a screen, a PowerPoint presentation, very short PowerPoint presentation. I'll try to go as quickly as possible through it. Just a few words about me. I have been, apart from teaching at university for more than 15 years, I was an electoral campaign manager in many campaigns, more than 30 years in Australia, Romania, and Republic of Moldova. So I will present more from this point of view, not from the point of view of the researcher, but more from a campaign manager. We just had 4 elections in Romania, actually 2 last year, and we got. I was responsible for some counties of the party USR, which is a pro-European party. And for example, in Brașov, we got first place, but we spent 70,000 euro only for online campaign. So what I'm trying to say in this short presentation, I will try to present very briefly what happened in this campaign. Only mainly in respect to the narratives regarding Ukraine. So. What I was surprised when I was surprised by the result of Georgescu, but I was more surprised by later on, after a few weeks, when all the things came out and we found out how it happened. It was not by chance, it was not just a happening, a coincidence or whatever. They planned this very attentively and for a long period of time. So I will go through all these slides very quickly, and I will show you only some of the tactics and strategies that they involved in this campaign, and particularly to the respect to Ukrainian anti-Ukrainian narratives. So they used some narratives about national sovereignty and anti-Western attitude. You know all these, and conspirational messagings and more than 25,000 TikTok accounts activated pre-elections, but they were made, interestingly enough, they were created a month and 1 year before the elections, and they started 2 weeks before. That was quite interesting. And then lots of Telegram groups, and they coordinated them very well. And one of the important ingredients of all this campaign was not only the money spent by Russians or other people, but the fact that they got a lot of fans, a lot of people to join their Telegram accounts for free. So basically they posted and reposted a lot of messages and video clips on TikTok and other channels. That was quite interesting. So also they used paid influencers, but they were not explicitly supporting him, but indirectly, and they got paid for this, and there were tens and many, more than 100 influencers, some of them important and some of them not important. And among the anti-Ukrainian narratives, this Romanian needs neutrality, stop the war, they actually built these echo chambers, and they got a lot of people to join and support these narratives. Okay, so what I noticed from these analysis that I read, they went on 3. You can't go on only one narrative and to get the support that Georgescu got. He got more than 2 million votes, and maybe 2/3 of these people didn't know who was Georgescu. So they went on 3 big categories: hope, faith, redemption, God, and all these patriotic and narratives. And also one of the key ingredients regarding narratives was hate, revenge, and resentment. So not all the people who voted for him were necessarily believers. Even if believing in God, was a very strong narrative for them. With the hate against the system was very important. And of course, the patriots to come back, to save the country and go back to the roots. So just if we go through all these tactics, but I'm not going to go because some of them I mentioned. So user influence, Telegram groups, social media posts a lot, mass media involvement. Some of the TV channels promoted him, and this is very important as well. Collaboration with extremist pro-Russian actors, religious emotional appeal, and conspiracy theories. Just a few seconds to show you, interestingly enough, is the profile of the elector. So I would have expected that old people and from rural areas to vote for him. No, there were people from small urban cities, and quite a lot of them young. So if you look at this graphic, is 45 years old is the majority of his electorate. That was quite a surprise. It is true that not educated, not very high educated, only 13% they have superior studies. So narratives related to nationalism heavily use it, and in relation to Ukraine, that Romania part about the cereal, the scandal with the cereals, and to touch the Romanian, and there were a lot of narratives against the Ukrainian export. Also, talking about the war, that helping Ukraine would bring us, take us into the war, and there were a lot of anti-EU and NATO narratives as well, even if the majority of population supports Romania being part of the NATO, more than 90%. So it's quite surprising that even almost everyone supports to be part of NATO, still some of these narratives have effect, and they get results. Okay, so what they did, they uploaded hundreds of short slogan-rich videos. They created engagement via bots, influencers, and shared hashtags. They avoided also the algorithm, so they used the algorithm in the advantage. So okay, so all they were independent patriots. That was one of the narrative, and okay, the party who supported him, they used a lot of other channels. For example, they used mass media, news, online papers. They created a lot of site news, and they at one point, a few weeks before the elections, all these news sites transformed. They were supporting Georgescu very much. So we had this concentrated campaign through a lot of channels and a lot of money. I'm not going to go through all these narratives, but some of them were very important in relation to Ukraine. The refugee narratives, as our colleague from Poland said as well, and from Czech Republic, digital nationalism, anti-Western, anti-democratic rhetoric, everything going on to patriotism and emotions. The Russia hybrid narrative, that all these guys who have a lot of followers online, they supported this guy, and the anti-EU, NATO, and Ukraine messages. Of course, anti-globalist conspiracy and all these fake news. And what was interesting, that all the narratives that we can find them in Republic of Moldova or Ukraine, they used them as well in Romania, with hashtags, engagement, farming, and emotional targeting. What I wanted to briefly to emphasize is that they started this years ago. They started to, here are some of the messages they use and the narrative they use to promote. But those, I put them in red, they are related to the war and NATO and to Russia. Yes, so in the end, before the elections, they emphasized quite a lot of this, that NATO wants us to attack Russia, to invade us. Just before the election, they tried to spread fear amongst the electorate. And from time to time, they pop up on these narratives on social media, and they were quite powerful. So Georgescu's most viral slogan, support for Ukraine is leading Romania to war. He used a lot, just 2 weeks before the elections, he used a lot peace, the word peace, everywhere, peace, peace, and that we should not support Ukraine because we will get involved in the war. And we know that fear is the most powerful force that drives people to vote. So that was one of the, precisely 2 weeks before the election. And this idea of peace came everywhere. The associated support for Ukraine with economic instability and national insecurity. Neutral, we need to be neutral. We don't need to be against Russia. And for example, here, one of the video clips I won't put them is peace with Russia. And this was just before the elections. So I went very quickly just through some of these narratives and how they worked against Ukraine, and got the support for Georgescu. And but it was a huge combination of all the narratives and all the tactics together, and they had a great effect and made this guy to get to the first position in the election. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this informative presentation, and I really think that we should, we in Ukraine should pay attention and follow the developments in Romania, because Russia may make a stand on the informational leverage within social media, and especially TikTok, because it lost most of its informational leverages in Ukraine since 2022, and given that Moscow, as for now, does not obtain any traditional media in Ukraine, which it may directly obtain, it will put forward its influence through different means, and especially TikTok is the threat number one, as the Telegram was in 2019. I think that the main shift will be that TikTok will become one of the most powerful informational toolkits which Moscow will try to use in its goal to interfere forthcoming Ukrainian elections. We do not know exactly when they will occur, but anyway.
Can I have 1 more minute?
Yeah, for sure.
Look, a very interesting news today. It appeared today. An opinion poll from today, which might change everything. So, if you can see, can you see the graph?
Yes.
So this came out today. It's very, very surprising. Even for me, it was surprising, and it is realized by an opinion poll by the independent candidate Orban, the mayor of Bucharest, who is a democratic and most important candidate for the pro-European, from a pro-European perspective and democratic. And he made this opinion poll, and I'm 100% that it is quite correct, at least in this moment. And look, first candidate is George Simeon, the extremist, and we know this. And second is Victor Ponta, an independent, former Social Democrat Party candidate, and he is in the second position. It's a big, big surprise. He was till now, he was 8% or something like this. So now, the real danger in Romania, and the Russians will support Victor Ponta as well, and the Social Democrat Party will support him as well. So the real danger is that we'll have in the second ballot, we'll have George Simeon and Victor Ponta. So both of them pro-Russian. Victor Ponta is not that much against the European Union, but he's a Russian puppet as well. So we are in a big danger, in a serious danger now, with the Victor Ponta running for election. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And now I'd like to give the floors to Mihai Isak, the foreign policy and security analyst, senior editor, Cardenis Press Agency from Romania. And please give us your attitude, your vision regarding the reasons for rise of popularity of far-right politicians in Romania.
Hello, thank you very much for your invitation. First of all, I want to congratulate my colleague Mihai Văcăriu for a very good presentation. I don't have any more, let's say, to add, but what I want to say is that this vote against traditional candidates in Romania has also a very important part as a protest vote against on how politicians are running Romania. And of course, we see this kind of using of anti-Ukrainian language in campaign. They talk about how the Romanians in Ukraine do not have rights. They talk about how the Romanian churches in Ukraine are besieged by Ukrainian security forces in Chernovtsi area. We can see that the Russian Orthodox Church is using Romanian Orthodox in Ukraine against Kyiv, against Bucharest, and of course against the Republic of Moldova. We've seen that even candidates from main parties like Rina Antonescu have some nationalistic discourse in their political campaign. Also, we have seen Mr. Ciolacu, the Prime Minister of Romania, a couple of times using some kind of interpretable language when they speak about the support for Ukraine. If we take Romanian support for Ukraine, I do not think that we are in doubt that Bucharest is a great friend, a great supporter of Ukraine. But again, this is a trend all across Europe. We have seen the same very good results for pro-Russian parties in Bulgaria, the party Velikiev, other parties from Bulgaria. We have seen this trend also across Europe, and Romania was surprised by the result obtained by Mr. Georgescu. But of course, as the poll showed by Mr. Văcăriu showed, Nicușor Dan is almost completely the only pro-European candidate that has some kind of chance to be in the second round. If we remember, in Romania in the year 2000, we had a very strange political campaign when we had the nationalistic Vadim Tudor against the former communist Iliescu, and a lot of people voted for Iliescu, for even pro-European parties, so that Mr. Vadim would not reach the presidency of Romania. I think in this second tour, also in Romania, we will have a lot of votes which will be protest votes against the nationalistic candidate. I think Mr. Simion has the first chance to reach the second tour, or a lot of people, even they are not supporters of Nicușor Dan, they will vote for Nicușor Dan. What is scary for me is that a lot of voters from the traditional parties like Social Democrat Party, National Liberal Party, are quite content to vote for this kind of nationalistic candidates. We had Mr. Georgescu is a creation of the the so-called Romanian deep state. If we look at what transpired in the Romanian media, if we look at the people around Mr. Georgescu, it's clearly some kind of movie which we could see in the Hollywood studios. We have mercenaries, Mr. Potra. I understand that you are well aware of our political situation. We have people who are running from the law. We had mercenaries from French Foreign Legion and other parts and other private or national armies. So this is quite an embarrassment for Romanian security services. They permitted for Georgescu to reach this kind of popularity in Romania, and unfortunately, I do not think that Romanian society has woken up enough from the last elections in the winter until now. And I want to say again, there is a very powerful protest vote against traditional candidates from traditional parties in Romania. Romanian political elite didn't give the chance to the Romanian electorate to choose new people. Nicușor Dan is, let's say, it's a try by Romanian political traditional system to have a saying in the future of the presidency of Romania. Of course, even if Mr. Simion or Mr. Ponta reaches Cotroceni, this will not mean that Romania will not be a member of NATO or a member of European Union. But unfortunately, if Simion or Ponta will reach presidential administration in Romania, I'm afraid that in Romania we will have parliamentary elections, and unfortunately the so-called sovereignist parties in Romania could obtain a majority in the parliament if we have future elections in Romania. And I want to say what a big problem for also for the Republic of Moldova. If Romania falls, the Republic of Moldova will fall. We have also in Chisinau parliamentary elections in the fall. So this kind of intertwining interests are forcing the authorities in Bucharest to take some measures for not to permit let's say this kind of vote. Unfortunately, as Mr. Vacariu showed in its excellent presentation, we have a lot of channels on Telegram, on TikTok, on WhatsApp, on other platforms that are not currently governed by any Romanian laws. Even if Mr. Ciolacu and other leaders from Romanian traditional parties are trying to impose some kind of rules, we have seen that these big companies do not take in account the desire of the Romanian traditional political elites. And again, we've seen that Mr. Simion's campaign, our party, Young People Party, the party which is very close to Mr. Georgescu, are intertwined with the interests from the former communist security forces services. And also, if we look at the people who received money, we've seen a lot of from TikTok, and this is what we know. But of course, a lot of this kind of payments could be easily shielded from Romanian authorities if they have taken place in offshore accounts. But again, unfortunately, we have seen this discourse against Ukrainian immigrants, as also in Poland and in Czech Republic. We've seen the discourse that Romania should participate in taking over some territory of Ukraine, which formerly belonged to Greater Romania in interbellum. And also, we have seen that people do not understand that this kind of behavior will not be sustained by our allies in European Union or NATO. And even if we, let's say, let's say with some counterfactual history, even if Romania would go with army to occupy these regions, nobody in Romania understands that today Ukraine is a military power, has one of the most powerful armies in the world. So not even in the wildest dreams of Romanian nationalists we couldn't occupy these regions. But nobody is trying to explain this careful to Romanian voters. And unfortunately, we have this anti-Semitic nationalistic discourse which gains more popularity on the on the TikTok and other social media.
Thank you so much. So I think that now we have a very complicated and detailed picture of what is going on in Romania, as just months from now, the first round will occur.
If I'm allowed 1 more minute, I want to say something about Romanian diaspora in European Union. We have seen these political parties having nationalistic Romanian parties like our or Young People's Party going into European Romanian communities. If you go to the places where Romania from the diaspora meet in Bruxelles or in Rome or in Lazio, you will see people from our party being there every single Sunday. you will see people engaging people from Romanian diaspora. Traditional parties do not go to discuss with Romanians from diaspora. Romanian diaspora, as well as Moldovan diaspora, are very important electoral players in our elections. As you well know, in the last presidential elections in Moldova, the vote from diaspora gave Maia Sandu a new presidential mandate. Also in Romania, we have a couple of millions of voters who live outside Romania, and unfortunately, traditional Romanian parties do not have a very well conceived policy towards them. And these people are literally abandoned for nationalistic parties. And also I want to say that unfortunately some clergymen from Romanian Orthodox Church are actively involved in propaganda, in this pro-Russian propaganda, in this so-called Dacian propaganda and so-called Greater Romania propaganda. And unfortunately, because of the lack of civil education, of good civil education in our system of schools, we have people who believe in this anti-Semitic discourse. We have people who make idols from people who were convicted after the Second World War for crimes against humanity. And again, we have seen this discourse that Ukraine is a failed state, that Ukraine is composed from territories of other countries, but nobody takes in account our common history, and that for hundreds of years, Romanian and Ukrainians fought together against Turks, Tatars, and other invaders. Also, as you well know, Piotr Movila is one of the greatest scholars in Ukrainian and Romanian history. It's an example on how Romanian and Ukrainians work together during history. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for addressing these informational threats regarding Romanian elections. And now I'd like to move forward to our Ukrainian experts, and I think now we may shift the language of our discussion into Ukrainian. However, I'd like to inform our foreign experts that we have a translation within our Zoom translation, so you may shift in the below the language and follow up the discussion. So now I'd like to give floors and перехожу на українську, так.
Let me switch into Ukrainian, and with this I'm passing the floor to Yuri Olinik, the PhD in history. So in my paper I have it in English.
Study Center, так, перепрошую, що так трошки, можливо, заплутав, так.
Переклад, будь ласка.
Ukrainian Studies for Strategic Studies. So first of all, I would like to thank our colleagues from Romania who have clearly shown us a situation which is unfolding in this country and the deep reasons of this political crisis caused not only by the external factors, what is important, but also by a lack of trust from the population to the political elites, which are not changing, and quite a difficult electoral map. But nevertheless, with this, I would like to pay attention that why do I emphasize Romanian example so much? Because for Ukraine, and probably for our enemy as well, for the Russian Federation, that is one of the key countries in the Central Eastern Europe, and that is the reason why. That is the reason why in this country we have such an intensive campaign of the Russian impact. Because the problems which are relevant for Romania now, they are relevant for the other countries. For example, Slovakia, Poland, and with the other countries. We do understand that Poland will never become pro-Russian country, but nevertheless they have different issues, even the regional polarization. There is another problem. But also there are some common features. The trust to the populist, lack of trust to official media. That is the reason for that is both propaganda, of external propaganda, and also the economical problems, external problems, because both Russian, and also we can understand that the Russian war in Ukraine also affects the situation, but also we can see that there is lack of understanding among the elites ruling the country now. They are not able to evaluate, assess the needs of the people. They cannot respond to these needs, and sometimes they do not hear the people. That is also the reason why we had why Donald Trump won the election. Some people didn't expect it, but I did it because some people were not represented enough. And the polarization of the society, which in fact in the US reached it at most. So this is an issue. The issue of polarization is not that vivid, and in Poland we, for example, have the conservative, for example, the Radical Confederation, and the rates are growing. We have the civil platforms, so they are kind of more lefties, but nevertheless there is some kind of balance. In the other countries where they are facing the issues with so to say division into if we compare, for example, the Romanian example, the positions of the non-systematic Georgescu and the rooted Giorgio Simone, we can see that Giorgio Simone is more kind of reasonable because he tries to draw attention to himself and not to support fully the support of Ukraine, but at the same time he supports NATO and he condemns the Russian aggression. So there are some certain swings, and that is a place where we should be looking for the partners, but non-systematic candidates who appeared due to lack of trust among the society and with, so to say, desire for trust, which were directly supported, directly financed by the Russian Federation. Of course, that is a threat of the full reforming and internal chaos, because the Russian objective is not to change the ideological map of Europe, so that the right became left, the left became right. Their objective is to make everything chaotic and polarized. And the new governments, which were related to, which were connected to the Russian Federation, or they were weak at some point when it comes to their expertise. So all of these together was weakening the ability of the countries. Of course, we do understand that the Russian Federation has huge money. They are throwing this money all around the world, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, lots of financing of different propagandist campaigns. But why do they spend so much money in Romania? Why did they start a TikTok, and why did they were working on deep state internet? So we see darknet. So we can see that it's not only the problem of the elites who are not in touch with the population, but also that is a problem of sociologists who could not show the real numbers, and that is the reason why we can say that it's another problem. So why Romania? So why did they spend so much efforts in Romania? Of course, they understood that Poland will not be efficient, and because objectively Romania which has around 30 million population, and Poland, that are one of the key countries in Eastern Central Europe. That is one of the countries with the biggest armies by number of people, by number of munition, and that is a state which has some experience in peacemaking operations, and also they have the key geopolitical, very important geopolitical position, that is the way to Balkans, where there is a strong pro-Russian impact. That is also an impact on Moldova and also impact on the Transnistria, and also the change in Bucharest leads to big pressure on Moldova and the additional opportunities to shake the situation from Transnistria, and of course the control over the Black Sea, because Romania borders with the Black Sea, and they do not have big fleet, and in Bulgaria they have a smaller fleet and less impact. And Romania is one of the leaders next to the Republic of Turkey and Ukraine in the Black Seas. And that is a huge problem. And if they would have managed to make them neutral, I'm not even speaking about the friendly states, of course, that would be a big victory for the Russian Federation. Let me remind you, by the way, I do not want to offend Polish, but in 2023, when we had the protests against the Polish farmers were blocking the checkpoints, so we managed to export our goods through Romania, through Romanian borders. So once again, that is the way to Europe, and a very strategically important way. So for both us and for the Russian Federation, it is important. And I think that despite everything, and in the future elections in June, we will continue attempts, even if Georgescu is out of the election campaign, but I can understand who are the potential candidates, who the Russian Federation might support if they invest a lot of money, and they want to stabilize the situation in Romania. So that is something we have to follow, and that is an important piece of this puzzle, and puzzle of security in Balkan and Central and Eastern Europe. Thank you very much, Mr. Yugi. We have shared, we have broadened the framework of our discussion, and we looked on this region through the lens of the relations of the Russian Federation and the US. And I think that we can consider the elections in Poland, Romania, and the Czech Republic. We can consider these issues through the perspective of the security point of view. And with this, I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Taras, candidate of science in National Security Public Advisory Council of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. So what are, in your opinion, what are the potential security threats in the context of elections in the neighborhood country? Thank you very much. Let me return, if you don't mind, to the hard security, from hard security to soft security, digital security, because in fact the Russian tools, set of tools the Russians are using not against Ukraine but also against the countries we've mentioned today, that is in fact the tools which can be used all around the globe, and they are based on the usage of different approaches and methods, and in fact different strategies, starting from the informational psychological operations, hybrid tools, and if possible they are using the hard tools and polarization, destabilization in the countries. So these things are absolutely combinable, and we cannot divide them because we cannot perceive the informational campaigns of the Russian Information or disinformational campaigns or propagandist campaigns in the Russian Federation, and to consider separately their intervening in the external policy of the countries, and for example consider separately the military threats which the Russian Federation generates, at least for the eastern flank of NATO. So from the Russian perspective, these things are interrelated, and quite often we observed how one type of threats and one type of tools in the Russian hands transformed very fast in the other tools, and then they are, so to say, were playing with these tools depending on the situation. And therefore Once again, I would like to emphasize when it comes to the hybrid impact on both on Romania, Poland, and the Czech Republic, and actually all the countries on the east flank. And actually, what it comes, because all of these started not yesterday and not with the countries we've discussed already. In 2024, we had lots of national elections in the Eastern Europe, where there was Russian intervening, and it was very obvious. And if we are talking about the general strategy of the Kremlin intervening to the external policy of the other countries, in this case, we're talking about destabilization of the situation in the country and about undermining the trust in the countries to the national institutions and democratic institutions, democratic procedures. So we are talking not about supporting some certain candidates into political forces. Of course, that is also a bonus, that is a benefit that allows the Russians, so to say, to keep their leg their foot in the doorway. But first of all, that is just destabilization of the situation, creating chaos and creating crisis, and the Russians are so good at that. And the Russian Federation quite often blames, so to say, a collective West, because they have this kind of idea of chaos and then promoting their own interests. But the classics of the Russian propaganda is to blame the enemy in what you are doing yourself. That is what the Russian Federation does, and that is the essence of the hybrid intervention of the Russian Federation. And for the Russian Federation, there are two levels. That is a tactical level of each separate country. That is what we were discussing today in a lot of details, for example, from those states which were mentioned today. And also the Russian strategy in these cases focused on the things which I already mentioned a bit earlier. And all in all, there is a strategic level. So for the Russians, using these tools of hybrid tools of and hybrid impact is focused mainly on the achievement of the objectives of the Russian Federation, which are meant to separate the Western countries, to undermine the trust of to the Western alliance, for example, the European Union, the North at NATO, and the similar ones, and also to make it possible so to say, USSR version 2 with all these impact they had. That is something that Putin regime is trying to achieve, and that is why they are synchronizing some certain things with. That is the reason why they are synchronizing with the new administration of Donald Trump, even though strategically Washington and Moscow have different objectives, but there are some kind of common points, and on the tactical level they have lots of similar visions. For example, both sides want to separate or destroy the European Union, because for the US that is economical competitor, and Donald Trump was smashing that quite a lot, and for the Russian Federation that is a step to move to raise a question on redistribution of the spheres of impact. So geopolitically, we can say that Russian efforts on hybrid destabilization of the states of the European countries, they are overlapping with Trump's effect. So to say that Donald Trump's presidency multiplies many things which are related to anti-globalism, anti-integrational perspectives, so things which we can see on the global level in the countries we were discussing. And one of the strategic objectives of the Russian Federation at the moment is expanding the confrontation with Ukraine, and they are trying to move it to NATO, and establishment of destabilization zone on the eastern flank of NATO, and it aligns with the Russian strategy. So before even the limited hybrid operation starts with the military forces, they have to establish, first of all, different points which will distract your attention, and then you have to make this eastern flank get separated, for the NATO not to be focused on the Russian threat, which can be relevant, for example, for Baltic countries or for Poland in the context of the Sval corridor. But when they distract you in this way, NATO and the EU will be distracted, and in this case, Europe will be facing two crises at the same time. The crisis related to, first of all, the hard security and the Russian interfering with the internal policies of the country. So that is something we have to remember, that for the Russian Federation, tactical and strategical level, they are interrelated, and from the Kremlin strategy perspective, that is the same thing. The impact in Moldova on the elections and geopolitical interest of the Russian Federation on the redistribution of the spheres of interest in Europe, and the same thing is regarding the set of tools used by the Russians. For example, disinformation campaigns and military interventions. Everything is interrelated in the Russian Federation, and that is one toolkit which is used by the Russians to achieve some certain results, both strategic and tactical, where they can see that it's possible. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Taras. And now I'd like to invite Yegor Barlyan, candidate of history, associate professor of the Department of International Relations and Strategic Studies, Kyiv Aviation Institute. And also, I'd like to mention your active work in Detector Media, where your long reads were posted on the disinformation in different European countries, including those countries we've mentioned today. So, in the context of the elections in 2025, in Poland, in the Czech Republic and Romania, are there the new narratives, or they are continuing the narratives which existed in the previous years? First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to Ukrainian Crisis Media Centers, and I would like to thank the International Renaissance Foundations. And yes, indeed, I wrote a few articles regarding this research. In Detector Media, we had conducted the second research on the Russian propaganda in Lublinsk, Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania triangle. And beside that, I had the text which I wrote after the statements of Romanian politicians regarding the fact that Bukovina area is kind of Romanian territory, and that Romania wants it back, and because Ukraine is kind of losing the game. And in my opinion, we can see that the Russian Federation continues the corrosion of the states in the Central and Eastern Europe. And therefore, I would have considered Poland, Romania, and the Czech Republic in five dimensions. The first dimension is purely national one, so in the framework of these states. The second one is the Central Europe. The third dimension is European Union, and the fourth one NATO, and the fifth dimension is diaspora. Romanian colleagues have already mentioned diaspora today, and I think that for us it is important to understand that one of the anti-Ukrainian narratives which were enhanced after 2022 and which are obvious now in the context of war in these three states, that are Ukrainians who fled the country and are now in Poland, in Romania and the Czech Republic. And for the Russian Federation, it is so important to use different local agents to say that, look, why the European Union, when giving the funds for the Ukrainian refugees in this way, the European Union is not thinking about these countries, and that Ukrainians are kind of taking the money which could have been spent on the social support of the population of Poland, Romania, and the Czech Republic. But obviously there is some certain specifics in Poland, and that is a serious polarization regarding the history, the common history with Ukraine. The beginning of the 20th century, and after communication with different Polish journalists and experts and politicians, I understood that, in fact, Polish consider Ukrainians as something positive. They support us, but nevertheless, in Poland, there is a part of society which, in fact, has some anti-Ukrainian positions, and from time to time, we can see different statements from Polish politicians, and I think that the Russian Federation enhanced their hybrid impact in Romania, that is the Orthodox Church, and we can see that the Orthodox Church is one of the hybrid tools of impact of the Russian Federation on Ukraine, and also the Orthodox Church is the strong tool in Romania. As for the Czech Republic, in fact, the current registration headed by Petro Pavel is showing the leadership in support to Ukraine, but at the same time there is the Russian impact through rich Russians who live in Karlovy Vary, where every year we can see the cinema festivals, and that is, so to say, a paradox, because on the one hand, the Czech Republic does not forget the events of 1968 and the Prague Spring, and how the Soviet troops and Moscow were occupying with the satellites the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, and namely Prague city, but at the same time the Russian impact is still in place. And I would like to say a few things about strategic communications. In my opinion, in the last 3 years, they have at least enhanced, they have improved. So on the one hand, we have the dialogue in the framework of the civil society. So different stakeholders are supporting different initiatives inside the country to support the dialogue with Central Europe. For example, the Central from Ukrainian Prisma, the forum, and also the Eastern Partnership on the level of the civil society. And in this case, Poland is the country where the representatives of 6 countries of the partnership, they are networking. And as for Romania and the Czech Republic, I can say that in fact we have to understand better, and we have to dive deeper into their history. And in my opinion, the basic thing for the strategic communications is, what do we want to deliver? So first of all, why for Ukraine it is important to have Central Europe, and second of all, what will mean the victory of Ukraine in the Russian war in Ukraine? Why the Russian Federation has to be defeated, and after that, what is similar about our nations? So in my opinion, we can see better strategic communications, and that is gradual joint efforts of the civil society, diplomacy, partially diaspora, government, partially analyticians and journalists of these states, who are from time to time attending Ukraine. But the task we have is the same. That is systematic work for the society of these countries to understand that they are under manipulation. And I repeat it again and again, that there is no sense of debunking all these Russian bullshit, and we have to analyze it, and there should so to be reflective reflections, but only our own narratives regarding these states could help us. And we can see that, for example, in Poland, the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs helps to establish the Ukrainian-speaking media. We have, for example, Slava TV. And in these contexts, it helps to improve the media landscape. But the elections are always the best opportunity for the Russian Federation to enhance the polarization in the societies. Thank you very much, Ihor, for this recapping, concluding statement and the complex assessment regarding these three countries and strategic communications of Ukraine. And I think that we can consider that to be the final conclusion of the assessments we've heard before. But now I'd like to present the results of the survey, which we conducted between the 10th and 20th March 2025, conducted by Ukraine Crisis Media Center. 115 experts participated, namely the representatives of the scientific community, journalists, and also cybersecurity experts from 3 countries. The objective was to identify the topics of Euro-integration, the place and the role of this topic in the perspective of the presidential elections in these countries. When we are talking about, for example, Poland and Romania, and parliamentary elections in the Czech Republic, which will be held in fall 2025. But nevertheless, we've already mentioned that the elections can be used by the Russian Federation and the other international agents of the informational impact to interfere with the local agenda, manipulations, and this kind of combination which occurs between the narratives which are promoted in the informational media landscape, and these narratives are used by the Russian Federation, and in this way they are enhancing these messages. And as a result, we can see that these, for example, the processes which are ongoing in Romania, when there is a threat that even in the second round, there will be the candidates who can actively be So there is a candidate in the second round who is pro-Ukraine and who can give the voice to Ukraine in the European Union and to provide the further support in the integration. So as for the results, the first question regarding the general assessment on how the experts assess the threats of disinformation in the context of the election campaigns. And that are the results we achieved. As for the Polish and the Czech experts, we can see that the opinion has got the same level. So in this way, the level of threat is 50-50. The part of the experts we interviewed consider that the level is quite high and that it can even affect the results of the election. At the same time, almost the same number of the participants considers that this kind of impact is there, but it cannot affect the results so much. But if we consider the results in Romania, we can observe a different situation. Around more than 80% of the experts from Romania say that there is a high level of the potential and existing impact of the Russian Federation disinformation, which can have an impact on the results of the elections. And quite obvious that these kind of results are related to the situation which occurred in the first round during the elections in November, which were cancelled, and manipulations around the campaign of Ceausescu. The second question was regarding the general assessment whether Ukrainian Euro integration issue is in the media landscape of these three countries. And here the opinion is also very different, but the majority in all of these three countries say that this topic is relevant, but nevertheless it's mainly raised in the context of the news, which are interesting for the local audience, which are relevant for the economic and social issues which occur in the countries. And as for Poland, just a few experts say that Ukrainian Euro integration is actively communicated in Polish media. And also a small number of respondents say that the topic of Euro integration of Ukraine is present in media landscape in Romania. So some say that this topic is only appearing from time to time, and also the others think that Ukrainian Euro integration is present in Romanian media. The most respondents consider that Euro integration is actively communicated now because and first of all, it is related to security issues, and nevertheless, Euro integration topic is still very relevant, and we can see that the security problem is bonded with the other sphere, mainly the European integration of Ukraine. The third question was regarding the assessment by the experts whether European integration of Ukraine, Euro integration of Ukraine will be the part of the addressed in the campaigns of political actors, whether political actors are going to use this topic in their political programs and targetations, and that is the division we have, and we can see that in the Czech Republic, as I would have mentioned, the government is promoting pro-Ukrainian messages and the active in supporting Ukraine and communication regarding the war in Ukraine, and only around 12% consider that this topic will be intensively discussed, and 60%, the majority, consider that Ukrainian Euro integration will appear in media depending on the situation, depending on the relevant content. In Poland, we can see even more experts who consider that Euro integration will become the part of the political agenda in the context of the elections, which is in fact obvious, considering the fact that the statements Kornowski made regarding the historical background which Ukraine has. So to reassess for Poland to support the European integration, and considering the fact that the candidate from Confederation is now actively getting votes, and the Ukrainian Euro integration can be bound to the historical context, and therefore we can see some growth in the context of the not only of the general support of Ukraine, but also in the questions of the Euro integration. And also in Romania, the question to the Ukrainian Euro integration is there is not much interest. if we're talking about the direct interest of the candidates to the European perspectives of Ukraine, the majority of experts consider that this topic is not going to be relevant at all for the candidates. But nevertheless, a big number of those who consider that depending on the context, depending on the results of the survey, we cannot be saying that during the last month this kind of change will happen, which will draw the attention of the candidates to the question of the Ukrainian Euro integration. But depending on the local topics, this issue might be interpreted and might occur in the election campaigns of the countries. So the first questions was regarding disinformation in traditional media and social networks, which can affect the Euro integration of Ukraine. And here, the opinion of experts were different. For example, in the Czech Republic, we can see that the first one-fourth consider that these kind of concentrated informational campaigns are held, but the majority consider that these kind of campaigns are, first of all, and by the way, that is something the experts were mentioning in the open questions, that the topic of the Euro integration is not in top of disinformation campaigns, and mainly the focus is made on the topic of the refugees, of Ukrainian refugees, the economical support of Ukrainians abroad, and the further support of Ukraine, which will lead to the Czech Republic being against the Russian Federation. And so for Poland, we can see that there is more interest to the Euro integration as a part of the disinformational campaigns before the elections, but nevertheless, it's 50-50 again. The experts do not have the unanimous opinion whether they are targeted, these disinformation campaigns are targeted, or they have some certain distributions among the topics. And as for Romania, we can see less attention from the point of view of the disinformation campaigns regarding the European integration of Ukraine, but something that this topic is considered and interpreted through the lens of the other topics, for example, history and economy. And the fifth question, it was a more kind of speculative question. So to say, relevant question. We decided to ask our experts, how will the potential contingent of 3 countries in Ukraine will affect the support from the society of these states regarding Ukraine, but of course in the context of the Euro integration of Ukraine. And the results we got were quite, so to say, different. The experts divided almost in the even parts, but the majority, around 35-45% in each of the countries, consider that the support of Euro integration of Ukraine will decrease if the military contingent of this state will be present in Ukraine in the framework of peacemaking operations. So the question meant that this kind of contingent will be after Ukraine signing the peace negotiations, peace agreements. So in general, we can say that that is a message which we would like to emphasize regarding the Ukrainian expert community and government, how Ukraine should communicate further the support for Ukraine, the support for Euro integration of Ukraine in case we will have more active engagement of the European countries to the regulating of the peace issue, and how can we explain the necessity to engage more international contingent to the situation on the ground, and how it will affect the support of Ukraine on its way to the European Union. So with these, that are the results of our survey. It will be published on the website of Ukraine Crisis Media Center today. And also we have prepared the video presentation, which is already on YouTube of Ukraine Crisis Media Center. And once again, I would like to thank the International Renaissance Foundation for supporting this survey. And I can see that Ihor has one comment. Yes, I'd like to say a few words about the European Union, because at the moment the representation of the European Union and also the European Union itself on the level of the strategic communication is on the cross of roads. So the thing is that what is the European project about? Because it's quite obvious that not all of the citizens of the European Union wake up or being happy with all of this. And now we have the question, what will be the future of the European Union? What will be the new European identity? And therefore, the results of this survey, for me, proved once again that the topics which are relevant for Ukraine are, namely the European integration, they have to be communicated once again in a different way, because you should not be relying on some geopolitical issues, the status of the candidates, the negotiations started, clusters started. So we have to be explaining what does it mean? What does Euro integration mean for different categories of Ukrainians? For scientists, for the representatives of civil society, for farmers, for businesses. And the thing concerns both of these three countries, Poland, Romania, and the Czech Republic. What does European Union mean for them? Thank you, Ihor. Do we have any kind of remarks or comments in the end of our discussion? So I think that we have discussed in details different aspects, especially the Romanian situation. So I would like to thank our Romanian colleagues for active participation and explanation of what is going on during this election campaign. And let's hope that the result of these elections will not affect our bilateral relations, and Romania will remain the active state which supports Ukraine both in security context and also in the context of the Euro integration. So thank you very much for the discussion. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and therefore, if there are no questions, no comments from our experts, I suggest to wrap up this meeting, this discussion, and let me remind you that on the website of Ukraine Crisis Media Center, you can find the results of the survey we conducted and also analytical explanation which our team prepared in the end of this project. Thank you very much for your attention.